What's up, y'all? Toya here, and I am back with another video for y'all. Before we get into the video, make sure you guys either like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. All right, y'all. So today, I want us to go ahead and put on our thinking caps and just have a discussion. Gig worker pay. Most of us have complained about it in some way or another. How many of you guys have done an order and thought afterwards like, that order definitely should have paid me more? Maybe you thought that up front and ended up just taking the order because you needed to go ahead and get something in your pocket. Maybe when you initially accepted it, you thought it was a good order, only to find out that there was a lot more to it than expected. Now, it's one thing to take an order and then complain about it when you already know what you were getting into, like taking a no-tip order and expecting there to be a cash tip, and then when there isn't, you get even more upset. Like, why? Just why? But I think a majority of us, we fall under that category of not necessarily complaining. We just kind of mumble under our breath. Like we might say, man, that order was trash. Like, I can't believe I took it. I fell for it. Maybe you get a little loud. You're a little upset. Like, I can't believe I took this. But for the most part, you kind of just like, yeah, I took it. I gotta own it. I took it. Hey, it is what it is. Or maybe you just have the passive complaint where you're scrolling through your phone looking for orders, and then you see one where you're like what? Who would even send that? Or maybe you pull the, oh, hell no, I ain't about to take that order. But we just simply want to be paid fairly for the work that we're doing. Considering that we are using our own vehicles, we have to put gas back into our car, we have to upkeep our own vehicles, buy our own supplies. We just want to get enough to justify taking that order, right? Now, if we had the opportunity to, let's just say, sit at the table with the companies and discuss gig worker pay, what would you say would be the most ideal pay for gig workers? So let's talk about it. Miles, time, items. These create the trifecta of an order. These are the components that you're going to look at to determine whether or not an order is going to be worth taking based off the pay that is presented to you. So let's start with the miles. Obviously, the miles are extremely important because the more that you drive, the more you're going to have to put gas back into your car, and the more maintenance you're going to have to do with your vehicle. Now, when you're doing delivery gigs, well, you're going to be driving. But what would you consider to be worth it when it comes to miles? Is the 2-to-1 ratio still suitable for you? $2 for every mile that you drive? Maybe more, maybe less? What about the differences between highway miles and regular street miles? 20 miles on the expressway is definitely a lot different than 20 miles taking the streets. Now, I feel like there are two extremes here when it comes to mileage. You have the driver that just does not care about miles. They're willing to pretty much take any and everything. They could literally have a job where they have to drive over 100 miles within a 2 to 3 hour period, and they will be happy with taking home 30 to 40 an hour. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you might have people that are looking to get $3, $4, $5 per mile. And I like to call these people the I hate driving delivery drivers, which, listen, I completely understand not wanting to put excessive mileage on your vehicle. But you signed up to be a delivery driver. Delivery drivers drive. So drive. But I would say that most people, they fall in between these two extremes, with some potentially leaning more to one or the other side. Now, what about time? Now, this is where I feel like things can get a little bit twisted, because you have people that are used to working under that employee standard. And I'm talking about the good old hourly rates. So let's just say somebody might ask you about your employment, and they ask you, how much do you make? If your salary, you might give them your yearly salary. Others might give their hourly rate. Now, can you do the same thing with gig work? Yes and no. Time can be measured a few different ways, and mostly it depends on the type of gig that you're completing. Let's just say you have a catering order that's going to pay you $50 and it's going to take you less than an hour. Let's just say 30 minutes. So do you say that you earned $50 in 30 minutes? Or do you use an hourly rate and say that you made $100 an hour? Now, I personally don't like to use the hourly rate when it comes to a single gig, especially if it takes you less than an hour to complete. It kind of just distorts how much you actually made because you didn't work that full hour. Now, if you did multiple gigs and you want to get an average, an hourly rate would be fair there. Let's just say you did a couple Amazon Flex blocks, maybe a 3-hour, a 4-hour, whatever. And so you want to go ahead and figure out what your hourly rate was. That's perfectly fine. And even if you decided to do a bunch of on-demand gigs for the day, maybe you wanted to decide, okay, how much did I actually make per hour based off of all these deliveries that I did during the time frame that I worked? That's fair as well. But keep in mind that your downtime should also be included in this equation, because while you're technically not working during that time in between orders, that's still time when you are out attempting to get orders. That's your downtime, your wait period. I'm part of a couple different gig app groups on Facebook, and I see people flexing all the time. Like, look, I made 40 an hour. I made 2,000 for the week, yada, yada, yada. But you're not taking into account all of that wait time in between each of those orders. I can guarantee you that you're probably waiting at least 15 minutes before each order. Maybe more, maybe less. It just depends. Now with a W-2, you're typically getting paid no matter what, whether or not you're working during that hour, minus breaks and lunch for some positions. But comparing that to gig work, you don't get paid for waiting. So that time becomes an extremely valuable component. Imagine you had an order that took you out of your area, took you out of your zone, and, let's just say it took you, I don't know, maybe an hour out of your zone, right? Now, maybe you can get a gig on the way back, but unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of gig work, it's just a matter of being at the right place at the right time. So the odds of that happening are kind of slim. So that's wasted time that you can't get back, and you won't be able to go ahead and make more money doing gigs. It's just dead time. So I can understand why some people might favor time when it comes to choosing gigs. Downtime could be a big factor, or they could just be looking for that hourly rate. And then of course, you might just have people that just take orders for what it is, not really considering the time that's going to be taking to actually do that order. And that's active time and not active time. But it can vary. Everyone is different. Now, last but not least, we have the items. Now, items can come in all shapes and sizes. Of course, this does depend on the type of vehicle that you have. You can do delivery gigs on a scooter or a bike, all the way up to a van or a box truck. But for purposes of this video, let's just go ahead and stick with the standard size vehicle, a car or an SUV. Now, this is where things can get tricky. Some apps like Spark and Instacart, for example, I think they do a fair job when it comes to providing the information about the items. You can see everything prior to accepting an order. So if you see that one order that has 20 cases of water, you can go ahead and look at that and be like, yeah, nah, we ain't about to do that. Unfortunately, there are some apps that are notorious for not providing all of the details. Rody, excuse me. But yeah, so, sorry about that. I had a little, tickle in my throat. So dimensions and the weight can play a part in helping decide whether or not an order is worth it, but that's assuming that this information is accurate. Imagine getting an order, you see the dimensions, and they're listing the order as a large order. On Roadie, for instance, a large order is supposed to be an order that can fit in your back seat. Now, imagine getting to the store, starting your pickup, and come to find out, you actually got to deliver 20 bags of mulch and soil. Definitely not the most ideal order, especially if you're only getting offered about maybe $20 to go ahead and do that order. Now, do you believe that order should pay more? Do you think 20 is cool? Do you think it should be $40, $50, even more? Well, that's up to you to decide. Heavy items, bulky items, or just simply a large quantity of items. All of these factors can turn an order upside down in an instant. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm pretty sure this is something that we all have faced. We took an order based off of what was offered to us, and then we get there and realize that it's completely different. And now we're trying to decide, okay, do we stick it out and complete it, or do we end up just dropping that order and risk affecting our ratings? Now, after discussing all three of these factors, do you think that it is possible to come up with the perfect order? Well, it's hard to. Of course, you have those orders that people consider to be unicorns, where the pay is so high, where the mileage and the time, the items, none of that even matters anymore. Getting 100 plus or 200 plus for something that technically is a simple order, those factors don't matter. But every now and then you might find an order that does check off each of those boxes. Unfortunately, most of the orders that we see don't even come close, or they might only check off one or two of those boxes. Low mileage, but there's too many items. There's only one small item, but it's too many miles. Maybe the miles are okay, but it's just gonna take too long for you to do this order. It takes you across town. The list goes on. So what do you value more? Do you value the miles, the time, or the items? And based off of what you value the most, what would you say would be the baseline when it comes to determining the ideal pay for a gig worker? All right, y'all, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I got for this video. Now, today I just wanted to highlight some of the primary factors that we're looking at when we're getting an offer. When we get that offer screen, there's just a couple things that stand out to us that, we got to go ahead and analyze what's in front of us to determine whether or not an order is worth it. Of course, there are some other secondary factors, maybe the time of the day, the weather, the delivery location, as far as if it's going to a house, an apartment, or a business. But I just wanted to have an overall discussion because I hear a lot of people saying, well, this isn't worth it. This is not a good order. But I want to hear what you guys think is a good order. What would be the criteria that you have to see in order to take that order? For myself, I would still say that mileage is probably one of the more important factors. I still aim for that 2-to-1 mile ratio. I give myself a little leeway sometimes, but 2-to-1 is typically my go-to. Now with time, not so much. It can vary. It just kind of depends on the gigs that are out there. As someone that only does gig work part-time, I don't really have a lot of options. So I end up taking what I can get as far as what fits into my schedule. And since this is a side gig for me, I'm not really aiming to go ahead and match what I'm making at my W-2. Now, would it be nice? Of course. But I'm content with taking home that 10 to 25 an hour if I can help it. Items, of course. If you watch my Instacart series, I stay away from water if I can. 2 cases of water is going to be my max. I typically don't do heavy stuff if I can help it. As someone that has Achilles tendonitis, I try not to put too much strain on myself if I can help it. But, if I have all the details in front of me, that'll help me go ahead and determine whether or not I think that order is going to be worth it based off of the items. But I would like to know what your criteria is. What do you value the most? Is it one of these 3 factors that we mentioned today, or is it something else? Let me know in the comments. Now, before I go, I have to remind you guys to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you do not miss a video. But I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to catch you guys on the next one. And as always, stay safe out there and keep grinding.